Okay, our new unit is on the cell membrane and cellular transport. So, we are going to start by talking about the cell membrane that will set us up to talk about how cells actually transport things in and out of the cell. So, first, we're just going to recap on some of the stuff we've learned about the cell membrane earlier. So, we said that the cell membrane's job is to maintain homeostasis in the cell by controlling what enters and exits. So the cell membrane's job is to maintain homeostasis by controlling what enters and exits cell. We also stated that we know that all cells have a cell membrane. Therefore, all cells will be able to transport things in and out of its cell. So, one thing that we know, cells are relatively small. I mean, when we talked about cell types, we did say that the eukaryotic cell is larger than prokaryotic cells, but in general, cells are very small. I mean, we can't see them with our eyes. And that raises the question of, well, why don't we have cells that are bigger? Why are cells so small? What limits their size? So, this brings us to the topic of surface area versus volume in cells. And this is what's going to contribute to cells being small. So the area outside of the cell is called its surface area. And everything in the middle is called the volume. As cells get larger, so as cells grow in size, the inside, I wonder if I can move me a little bit, the inside volume, the volume of the cell is going to get larger at a faster rate than the surface area. So as a cell grows, the volume of the cell grows at a faster rate than the surface area. And a cell wants a high surface area to volume ratio. The reason that this is because any cell part does not want to be too far away from the cell membrane. Remember, the cell membrane controls what goes in and out. So everything that comes in, food, waste, nutrients, information, it has to cross the cell membrane in order to come in or go out. If a cell was too large, it would take too long for the information, the nutrients, or the waste to get in and out. Therefore, smaller cells are going to work more efficiently than larger cells. And therefore, cells need a high surface area to volume ratio. The smaller the cell, the higher surface area to volume ratio. So let's look at this. Let's just use these cubes since they're already here. Let's say I have an organelle in the middle of each cell. It's my organelle, the little dot that I'm putting. And that organelle needs nutrients, and it needs nutrients fast. If it doesn't get nutrients fast enough, the cell is going to die. And this first cell down here, the smallest cell, it doesn't matter, even if I pick the farthest away angle in the corner, I get there very quickly, right to the center organelle. I go up one stage, my cell gets a little larger. I have to travel twice as far. I go up one more. I have to travel 3 times as far. And in the largest one here, I'm traveling 4 times as far as I did in the first one. Meaning, if my cell is really large, it's going to take so much longer to get my nutrients in, to get my waste out, to get information where it needs to be. Therefore, the smaller the cell, the faster it's going to transport this information, the faster it's going to get the nutrients into the center, the faster it's going to be able to communicate, the faster it is going to be able to get all the waste out. And this cell has a high surface area to volume ratio because there's more room on the outside than there is on the inside. In order to believe that part, we're gonna have to get into a little bit of math, but we're not gonna do that right now. I can say that surface area is going to again, it is larger here in the smaller cell because it has more room on the outside than it does all the space on the inside. And that's going to make that cell work more efficiently and faster than if it were a large cell. So again, the cell membrane separates the living cell from the outside environment. The cell membrane controls what goes in and out. It is called selectively permeable, meaning not everything can go in and not everything can go out. The cell selects or chooses what can come in and what can go out. So not everything can cross. Some things cross more easily than others. The cell membrane is selectively permeable, meaning it selects what goes in and out. The cell membrane itself is made up of phospholipids, proteins, cholesterol, and carbohydrates. Now, since we're talking all about the cell membrane, I just want you to be prepared. The cell membrane can have lots of names. So I can refer to it as the cell membrane, the plasma membrane, the phospholipid bilayer, the cytoplasmic membrane, and there's no space to put it, but there is another one that you sometimes hear, and that's called the fluid mosaic model. So just know anytime you hear one of these, I'm referring to the cell membrane. So the first component of the cell membrane was a phospholipid. A phospholipid, it's one of these guys here. We talked about it way back in Unit 3 when we talked about lipids. Phospholipid was a type of lipid, or a type of fat found in the cell membrane. It has a phosphate head. The phosphate head is polar. Because it's polar, it is hydrophilic, meaning that it loves water and it faces outward. So if I was labeling this here, I would say it is a phosphate head, polar, and hydrophilic. On the other side here, we have fatty acid tails. They are non-polar, meaning they do not have any type of charge. Therefore, they are hydrophobic, meaning they hate water. They want to stay away from water. Therefore, in the cell membrane, they face inwards. So if I was finishing up this labeling here, these guys here, these are going to be my fatty acid. They're made of fatty acid. They are tails. They are non-polar, and they are hydrophobic. So that's my drawing of my phospholipid, bloop, 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 and then all the labels. And my phospholipids are going to be arranged in a bilayer, meaning 2 layers. So here is a bilayer. And if we were to label it, let's just say this is outside of the cell. This is the inside of the cell. Outside of your cells, you find water. Inside of your cells, you find water. And what part of the phospholipid likes water? If we go up, it's the heads. Therefore, in this bilayer, the heads are facing outside of the cell and inside of the cell, and the tails are conveniently located here in the middle to form the hydrophobic region because there's no water in the middle. So our hydrophobic tails are located in the middle because there's no water. So again, these are our tails. These are our heads. Our tails are hydrophobic. Let's see where I can write that there in a way that it'll fit. Our heads are hydrophilic. And that is why they arrange themselves in this order. That way the heads can be happy near the water on both sides, and the tails are conveniently located right in the center where there's no water. And that's what makes them the happiest. Okay, the second component that we talked about in the cell membrane are the proteins, and proteins can have one of 3 jobs in the cell membrane. They can be transport proteins. Transport proteins allow things to go in and out of the cell membrane. They could be receptor proteins, which are going to transfer information from one side of the cell to the other. Or they can be marker proteins, which identify the cell. It's kind of like a little name tag. Hey, I'm a heart cell. You can talk to me about heart things. Those are the jobs of marker proteins. One thing that I do want to mention about all of these parts, the phospholipids specifically, but as well as the proteins, this whole membrane is considered fluid, meaning things move around. The phospholipids can move around, they can flip sides. Things are constantly moving and rearranging. So that is one thing to keep in mind about all of these different parts as we go. So again, the membrane, selectively permeable, meaning it chooses what goes in and out. And this helps the cell maintain homeostasis. The cell membrane has fluidity, meaning it is flexible. It's able to move. It can change its shape. Things move around from one side to another. And the reason that it does this is due to cholesterol. Cholesterol maintains fluidity in the cell. So that's when we said things move around and shift. That is the membrane being fluid, and that ability is due to cholesterol. Cholesterol is going to control how fluid a membrane is and how much it moves around. And that is why the cell membrane can be referred to as the fluid mosaic model. We put that up a couple slides up, we wrote fluid mosaic model for another word for the cell membrane. And that is because everything in the cell membrane is not fixed into place. It can move. It is fluid. Things can shift around. They can move from one side to the other. So fluid means can move, and cells can also alter their membranes based on what they need. So cells can alter the cell membrane based on what the cell needs. So things are always moving, not fixed. Ability to change means fluid. And that is why the cell membrane can also be referred to as the fluid mosaic model.